Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Cocktail Podcast. Today, we'll be discussing your homemade bar guide. If you have guests coming over, what things you should have, what you shouldn't, and some little tips and tricks. Now, this is a perfect guide for what you should have in your home if you plan on having people over. Now, this can either be for having a couple drinks or just like a casual dinner party, more so than just kind of having a couple drinks before going out. You don't want massive amounts of people. This is more for higher quality, less quantity stuff. I will preface this though by saying that everybody kind of has their own taste, and I've tried to keep this episode a little bit more general. But obviously, we'll have a lot of my own biases towards certain alcohols and certain flavors in it. So feel free to put your own like little twist on it and make sure you tailor it to your own tastes. So firstly, I want to talk about freezer door cocktails. Now, if you haven't heard of them before, freezer door cocktails are cocktails that are made ahead of time in fairly large batches that you then store in the freezer so that they're ready to go for whenever guests arrive. Now, the reason these are so good is because, firstly, you do all the prepping ahead of time. So if you've got, let's say you've got 6 different guests around and 3 of them want cocktails, and you have all the ingredients, like we're not even considering the ingredient part, you've then got to go and make 3 cocktails. And if they're 3 different ones, it might take you time. You've got to wash everything, blah, 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 blah. Right? Pain in the ass. If you have them pre-batched, all you have to do is open a bottle, pour them over ice, boom, sorted, right? Now, it also means they're really, really consistent. Because you're making such a big batch of it, the first drop of it and the last drop of it will taste exactly the same. You're going to have barely any differentiation in between how your cocktail's going to taste. And also, they come out super chilled because they've been in the freezer, which is what, like, minus 15, minus... I don't actually know how cold a freezer is. Minus 15, minus 20 degrees. They're pretty well chilled. Over some ice, they stay cold for a long time, less dilution. Great thing to have. However, don't go thinking you can just put any cocktail in the freezer and it won't turn into a slushie. So what's really interesting is a lot of people know that if you stick alcohol in a freezer, it usually doesn't freeze. And now this is true because the freezing point of alcohol is actually quite low. I think the boiling point is about 65-ish degrees Celsius, and the freezing point is somewhere between like minus 20, minus 30. That is a complete guess. I haven't looked it up, so don't quote me on it. However, it is much lower than water. So therefore, you could put alcohol in the freezer, and it won't necessarily freeze. However, right, what's the difference between a 40% alcohol and a 80% alcohol? The 80% alcohol has more alcohol in it and less water. So if you have a 40% bottle of vodka and an 80% bottle of vodka, the 80% will have a lower freezing point, so therefore you'll need to get it colder in order to freeze it than a 40%. So this also works in the opposite direction. If you're making a cocktail with 40% rum, let's say, for example, if you put loads of other ingredients in it that are not alcoholic, that will actually raise up the freezing point, which will make it more likely to freeze and turn into a slushie. So the way people get around this is that either they use cocktail ingredients that are really high percentage. So some way people get around this is by using higher ABV spirits. And the reason for this is because obviously as you start to dilute it down with other non-alcoholic ingredients, it tends to reach a higher average ABV, so therefore won't freeze as easily. Secondly, they tend to make cocktails, freezer door cocktails, that are made of pretty much just alcoholic ingredients. Such things like Negronis, Old Fashions, Martinis. And again, same reason. If you have 40% gin and like 22% vermouth, then the average percent averages out about 32, 34%. Whereas if you make a Cosmopolitan, then it might be like 12, 15, 18%. So therefore, that percentage is going to matter a lot, depending on whether it's going to freeze or not. Saying that, I had a little look online, and there are people advertising Cosmo, daiquiri, cocktail lists, cocktail ingredient lists, recipes, that's what they're called. Daiquiri Cosmopolitan recipes that you can put into the freezer and that they won't freeze. My advice would be, if you see a recipe that you like the look of, just give it a try. Because worst comes to worst, you put it in the freezer, it freezes, and you just take it out to thaw, and then it's fine. Or you just take it out, put it in the fridge, and, you'll be okay. It's not going to kill your cocktail, so I think you're fine. Tip number 2 is to make sure you don't underfill the bottle. Now, this seems like quite a counterintuitive one, so let me get into it. The more air you put in the bottle, it allows more currents to kind of go around it. And so that allows more cold to get in and can make it easier to freeze the cocktail. The third thing is to make sure that you dilute it beforehand. Now, most of the time you go to a cocktail bar, you'll see bartenders, you'll see mixologists, and they're always shaking. They're always shaking, stirring drinks, not only to chill it down, but also they want to dilute it. Now, there is a sweet spot with this. Too much dilution will just kill a cocktail. However, if you're just pre-batching it and you're not actually shaking it or stirring it before you put it in or after you put it in, then you're going to have to make up for that dilution somewhere. So my advice would be to use about a quarter of the total cocktail volume as distilled water when you put it in and when you're doing your calculations. So let's say, for example, you're making a Negroni batch. You can do 25ml gin, 25ml Campari, 25ml sweet vermouth, and then also add in 25ml of water. Therefore, that's 100ml in your whole cocktail. You have a 700ml bottle, boom, sorted, 7 servings of Negroni in there. Now, a great thing you can do as well is if you're doing martinis and you like them with a lemon twist or you like them dirty with olives, one good thing is you can do is put a lemon twist or an olive into the bottle for 24 hours and just leave it to infuse and then take it out. And that will transfer some of those flavours across to the actual spirit itself. And then that means ahead of time you don't have to prepare all those garnishes and it's not so much effort for you. Secondly is wine. And now, wine always seems to be a really difficult one for people to kind of keep a selection and to give when guests come around. It's also a thing that I think a lot of people find really daunting to buy, just because there's so much choice, there's so many different labels, different countries, different areas, different chateaus, different this, that, and the other, right? So there's so much out there that almost is like choice paralysis. So what I've tried to do is try and keep it to a range of options, very general, so that it can almost please anybody. Again, if you feel like, there's a bottle that you like and you only like those bottles of wine, go buy it. Who am I to tell you what to do? But have a little listen. If there's anything that tickles your fancy, do a bit of research on it and see what you think. So, personally, I would keep 2 to 3 bottles of each white and red. That's kind of all year round. And then, 1 bottle of rosé. I'm not a massive rosé person. If you are, obviously, augment it. And this is all, obviously, not all within my fridge at the same time. I don't have 4 bottles of wine sitting in my fridge and then 3 cocktails sitting in my freezer at all times. But this kind of rotates through how I'm feeling and also what time of year it is. As it starts to creep more into winter, I'll start to buy a little bit more red, kind of sub out that rosé part. And as it starts to get towards May, April, I might put back some of the more heavy reds and buy some more white, orangey wines almost. So with white wine, I usually go for at least one bottle that's like a light dry wine with some like fruity notes on the nose. So this is the area where you'll find your New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs and your like cold climate unoaked Chardonnays. With the second, I kind of feel like you want to go for a slight off dry wine. So a Riesling, a Gewürztraminer, something that's just not overly sweet, but something that can be drank by itself almost. And it's kind of just there as an option for those who like white wine but aren't completely sold by dry, or oh yeah, well I like dry wine but I don't necessarily like Sauvignon. Boom, sorted. Here you go. Oh, that's something different, like blah 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 blah, whatever. Thirdly, this is when you can kind of have a little bit more freedom. I feel like white wine, there's so many interesting whites out there, but they kind of get very overshadowed by the very popular ones. So this is where you can almost be like a loose cannon with it. At least this is what I'm going to do. So I'm really looking at some options at the moment. So this is stuff that you buy, you think it looks interesting. If you offer it to people, they don't like the look of it, they don't want it, they try it, don't like it, whatever. Something that you would be interested to try anyway. If they decide they're going to go for that white, boom, you have a glass with them. You're not going to let that bottle go without having some yourself because you bought it because you wanted to try it. And if nobody wants it, you just have it to yourself. Sorted. So this is stuff like Austrian Gruner Veltliners, Romanian orange wines, a Sicilian Zibibo, for example, like Muscat Alexandria grapes, all those really rare and wonderful stuff that you wouldn't necessarily find walking down the usual supermarket shelves. Just basically anything you go through, see a label, catches your eye, and you go, you know what, looks cool, I'll get it, I'll try it. Now, red, you kind of want to cover all bases again, because there's always going to be a situation where you can pull out one of those bottles and it will work. So you want something light and easy to kind of like slurp down, supremely gluggable, if you will. A medium-bodied like people pleaser wine, and a full-bodied like menacing wine with some more like barrel-aged notes on it. So regarding light wine, you'd go for a Beaujolais. That's a region in central France that produces really light and like fruity wines. That have a little bit of spice behind them. Or even like a Pinot, or even like a Pinot Noir or a Merlot. Depends really on the bottle, depends on the region, but something along those lines you'll never go wrong with. Now, you want it to be slightly lower in percentage than the other reds. So I would say, as a reference, like a benchmark, no higher than 13.5%. Anything above 13.5%, and it's not really going to be as light-bodied as you want it to be, and it will carry a little bit more weight to it. And as you're kind of spreading your bases across, you've got something in that middle category anyway, so you really want it to kind of sing in a category of its own. And light wines are quite nice because you can just sit down, you can have a glass of it and just feel like, it hasn't really hit you at all. Like, there's a big difference, personally, between 12% wine and 14% wine. That 2% does mean a lot. And usually, you can have a small glass of 12% red and not be feeling it at all. And it will be really smooth and like satiny going down. Now, for your medium-bodied wine, I'd suggest like a Spanish Crianza. So similar to a Rioja, but has just been aged for like 12 months in barrel. Otherwise, an Italian Appassimento. I've butchered that pronunciation, but these ones are great to have. If you haven't heard of them, they get the grapes and lay them out on straw mats to let them dehydrate. And essentially, they brings all the water out of the grape. So when they put it through the vinification process, the wine's much more concentrated in flavour. But because it's still got It's still got much more concentrated flavour because it's less diluted, but it's still got the same amount of skins in there from the actual grapes itself. It doesn't necessarily go up more in like body as much, so it can still kind of stay in that medium bodied range, even though it has a much more like fierce flavour on it. Or even, you know, some blended wines. You can get some really cool stuff. What was it? I tried a blend of Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot the other day from New Zealand, and that was really nice. They got it paired up quite nicely, that you got the massive flavour profile of the Malbec on the front, and where you kind of expected it to have that really strong wine flavour on the end, it kind of tailored off and was nice and like smooth satin finish. So you got all the nice, powerful, strong flavours you were looking for from the wine, and it didn't feel like you drank a massively hard wine either. So there was some really cool blended stuff that people are working on at the moment that can kind of hit that nice mid-range. Now, regarding your like big, full-bodied bottle of red wine, this is going to be the type of bottle you pair with some big, juicy meat dish, very gamey, rich, potentially a bit spicy flavours, just because anything that medium or lower bodied will just get lost. So this will be your Shiraz from your hot climates, your Argentinian wines, some of your Malbecs from France, or like super Tuscan wines from Italy, even some southern Italian reds are absolutely amazing for this type of thing. In case people don't know, a super Tuscan is they're quite well sought after. So Italy kind of has these indigenous grape varieties. The reason that there's so many like well-known grape varieties, Malbec, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, blah 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 blah, is because when people would go and explore territories, they would take over vine cuttings with them. So, for example, Argentina has a lot of grape varieties that are similar in France. So that's why Argentinian Malbec is so popular, when actually Malbec is originally a French grape variety. So the Italians didn't do as much exploring and didn't necessarily spread their vine cuttings as far, so they've stayed quite indigenous to just Italy. But these super Tuscans is where they integrate some of the international grapes in. So therefore you get the really nice Italian like ground and climate working together with sometimes some of their indigenous grape varieties mixed in together. It makes for some really cool and some really interesting wine. So if you get a chance to try it, do have a look into it, although they're sometimes a little bit more on the pricey side. Now, your one rosé wine. I had to think about this because I personally don't have that much experience drinking rosé. As I said before, I'm not a massive rosé drinker. I've only really started to drink it the last few years. But if I was going to go for a people pleaser based off what I know people enjoy, I'd go for something like medium dry. You don't want anything sweet. I know there are people that really enjoy sweet rosé, and that's absolutely fine. However, medium dry, I just don't think you can go wrong with it. Like Côte de Provence, southern France. As it gets to summer, you can kind of bring in more of like potentially a slightly more sweeter one if you want. Or even if you wanted to bring in a slight drier one. This is what I mean. So, rosé is ultimately something to be drunk in your garden. So, however you kind of want to have things out in the sun, if you find that you tend to be drinking beers in the sun, then go for something a little bit more drier if you like rosé. You know, if you go for a Coca-Cola, go for something a little bit more sweeter, whatever, right? But the main point I want to hammer home is you are the person who is buying this alcohol at the end of the day. It is your house where this alcohol will reside. Yes, it is for guests. However, you need to make sure you like it. So therefore, you cannot like really full-bodied red wines. And that entire last section that I completely mentioned could be completely useless for you. But as long as you know that, you're fine. If you haven't learned that, go to a restaurant. Next time you're at a restaurant, ask the waiter for a full-bodied glass of red and ask for a recommendation to go with that wine. The more you get out and the more you try what you like and what you don't, the more you can know, okay, great, I can have this stuff. It's always nice having alcohol at home that, worst comes to worst, you can drink it, because it's so annoying when stuff goes to waste. Now, to kind of finish off this list a little bit, as just kind of, I don't really know how I'd phrase this section, but essentially, I wanted to talk about beers, ciders, low alcohol stuff, soft drinks, whatever. So, beers and ciders, I think, are a really difficult one. I feel like cider has a really specific market, whereas beer drinkers will tend to drink something else. And that's from my personal experience, is that people who drink beers really like beers. However, they will always have something else that they prefer, whereas some people just drink cider just because they don't like the taste of alcohol. It's the only thing that agrees with them. They're gluten intolerant. I don't know. So, if I was going to go for one or the other, I'd go cider. Cider, I feel like, is more applicable to those people that won't slot into the sections that we've already covered. Low alcohol stuff, soft drink. I'm not gonna advise you here on soft drinks, on what you want to buy. You buy what you want. And then like a non-alcoholic option. I would stay away from non-alcoholic wine. The stuff that's at least partially worth it is a little bit too expensive to be paying for non-alcoholic stuff. Non-alcoholic beers, non-alcoholic ciders are pretty decent in price at the moment. They are still expensive. They still probably cost the same amount as normal beers. However, it actually takes them more of a process. And I'm currently planning on doing a non-alcoholic section because I got very curious during Dry January to do it. So I know I was not doing Dry January, but I just got very curious with everybody doing Dry January about why it was so expensive. Heading back to freezer door cocktails really quick. A reason they're so brilliant as well is because if you want to be able to make cocktails at home, it's so fucking expensive. You look at any kind of barman or whatever, mixologist, as they call themselves on YouTube, and they've got £200 on how to set up your home bar. And it's only, that's 10 bottles, right? 10 bottles, 20 quid. It's not the best quality spirits, but you need that range. Otherwise, you end up buying 3-4 bottles to make one cocktail, and then you're stuck making that cocktail until you drink all those bottles. Or you budget, okay, I'm going to buy 2 bottles a month, and then I can make these cocktails, and you slowly build it up over time. But that's not even including if you had to buy refills. 1 month you get really into making Manhattans, and you go through an entire bottle of sweet vermouth and a whole bottle of whiskey, and you've got to buy that. So therefore your other options are out the window. And then you go, you know what, I'm really sick of making Manhattans now. I wish I could make something else, but you can't because you've just restocked. So yeah, freezer door cocktails, because you're pre-batching them, and you might have 1, 2, maybe even 3 at a push. That's what I do. I have martini, old-fashioned, Negroni. Those 3, because I know what I'm going to be buying and I do all the calculations beforehand, I know that I can buy a slightly more premium spirit to go in my gin martini rather than spending, £18 on a bottle to try and make it. So another really good point for freezer door cocktails. Now, just to finish off on the point of spirits. Spirits is such a hard one because it doesn't matter on the mixer, it matters on the spirit. People who drink gin and tonic probably would go for a vodka tonic. There's no replacement for a rum and coke. There's no replacement for a whiskey coke. They're just so difficult. So as opposed to doing mixed drinks, spirits and mixer, I think the best way you probably go about it is you have one bottle for shotting, and you have one bottle for shotting, so tequila, sambuca, whatever you want. I am not going to advise you on that because... yeah. So one bottle for shotting, one bottle for aperitif, and one bottle for digestive. So personally for me, for aperitif, I'd be going for a Pernod, a Ricard, something like that. Really aniseed, mix it with water, nice light French drink, right? French also drink cold port as an aperitif from time to time. So you could even have a really, really light whiskey as an aperitif. You could have gin and tonic, vodka tonic, whatever, right? That's your aperitif. We've already discussed the shotting one, or not in this case. And then digestive, something a little bit more strong in flavour, something aged, cognac, Armagnac, Calvados, pear brandy, bourbon, what else? Could even go for a sake, to be fair. Sake would not be a bad one to go for. Shoju, tequila, loads of stuff. So, yeah, my advice, freezer door cocktails. To finish up and to summarise what we've gone over in this episode, you go freezer door cocktails. You pick which ones appeal to you, you have a look at the recipes, make sure you dilute beforehand, don't underfill them. And make sure that they're not going to freeze. Worst comes to worst, if they freeze, not a big deal. Wine, 3 white, 3 red, rotate it year round according to what you feel. Spread it about. White, go for a couple of crowd pleasers, and then go for one that's really weird that you like the look of. Red, go for something light, go for something medium that anybody could drink, and go for something big and heavy for whenever you cook those really, really big, deep, juicy, like meat-filling flavours. Lower ABV stuff. I'd say cider. Cider, I say, works better, fits into more options than beer does. If you like beer, go for beer. Who am I to tell you? Non-alcoholic stuff, brilliant. Get it. Cheaper than normal, usually. So why not get a bit of it? Spirits. Go for something you can shot, just in case, because you never want to be that person where everybody wants shots and you don't have anything, so always worth getting a bottle. And then something for aperitif, something for digestive. That's what you need, and that will be sorted. Now, I'm not saying that this is cheap and this is easy, and this is something you should go out the minute you move into a new flat and buy everything in one go. However, this is something that you think of and you plan over time. You might end up having a dinner party and you go and you buy 3 bottles of wine and then 2 and you get drunk and you have 1 spare. Great, whack it in your collection. Don't drink it, it's not for you, it's for you to put there whenever you have random guests coming over. Those freezer door cocktails, brilliant. Leave them. Unless it's a hard day or, special occasions. This is stuff that you keep to please people for when you come over and be that nice. That nice guest that's very welcoming and hospitable towards them. You save your very nice stuff for your guests. You keep a little bit back for yourself, but ultimately you want to be really nice and kind of show them how much they mean to you. So that was the episode for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to send me a message on Instagram at The Cocktail Podcast if you have any ideas for episodes that you'd like me to cover in the future. Otherwise, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.